we're going to be talking about how to do some watercolor techniques, very basic ones. And so that's what we're going to do today. Let me tell you what we need before we start. So you need paper. Okay, I have my paper right here. It's already sectioned out into 8 equal pieces. Okay, they're not equal, but 8 pieces. So definitely not equal. So you can section it out, which means that you need some tape, some masking tape. You can do this without tape. It doesn't really matter, but it's going to be a little more difficult to see the effects. So I would go with some tape, and you need some watercolors. Let me show you some of it, what I'm talking about. So some watercolors. These are Holbein's, which is a Japanese brand, I think. You need a brush, and I'm going to be using this brush here that's in my water. It's just a small-ish brush. It's not a very big one. It's just a regular size brush. You need water. This is my dirty water jar. And I suggest you get a second one for clean water too. So you can clean your brush in your dirty water and then rinse it again in the clean water. So the water that you're putting in your paint is not muddied and doesn't ruin your colors. What you'll also need is a palette. I'm gonna get a different one, but you need a palette for your tubed watercolors if you're using those. And I think that would, oh, one more thing. You need tissue or paper towel for some of the lifting techniques that we're gonna learn. And I like to keep a little towel on hand to like dry my brush if I have too much water or too much paint on my brush. So you can use those things. So that's pretty simple. That's all you really need to get started. And so let's get started. All right, so here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna start with getting our paints ready. So I have my different colors. This one's my blue, and this one is my green, which is just a Viridian. So let me tell you the exact colors. This one is cobalt blue hue, and this one, and the green one is Viridian hue by Holbein. So what I'm gonna do is just gonna leave this here for a second, and then I'm gonna get my brush first, okay? So right now we have like the darkest color we can make. This is no water. These are the most concentrated colors we can make. So once we add water, it's going to dilute the color and make it a little bit, lighter, a little more transparent. So I'm going to add some water. I'm going to start with green. You can start with whatever color you want. And then we're going to make our little first technique in one of the boxes. It doesn't matter which box you use, as long as you kind of just put them in a box and you remember where they are, because maybe later you'd want to like label them and see the differences between each kind that you make. So I'm going to start moving the camera so you can see better what I'm going to do. So first things first, I'm going to get some water, put it inside my green. So you see I'm not really sticking it directly into, the paint. Just taking some water, and this is actually a bit muddy right now. It's a little bit blue because I've been using it with my blue paint. So it doesn't really matter right now. It's still fairly clean. So you can see I'm taking a little bit of the green at a time, making the shade that I want. I want it a bit pigmented, so I'm going to use a good bit. I want it kind of dark. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. You can always have another piece of paper at the side to see just how dark it is. So this is not the same kind of paper as this, but it's a good test. I just wanted to see how dark. So I'm going to make that much. Now, ideally you wouldn't want to clean your brush right after doing that because that's a waste of paint, but I need to set up my technique. So the first technique that we're going to do is wet on wet flat wash. So I'm just going to take some clean water and just stick it on here. Okay, so I'm just putting my clean water on here, and I need to actually clean up some of my tape because it's a bit dirty. It's gonna mess up my paint if I don't clean it now. So I reuse my paint, or my tape, sorry. I reuse my tape. I reuse my tape because it's waste not, want not, right? So, but you just have to make sure that if there's paint on the tape, that it doesn't reactivate once you put it on here again and you have a different color. So now I have water on my paper, so you can see maybe that it is just a nice gloss. There's no pools of water on there. That's what you want. You want something like that. So if you have a pool of water, you're gonna have a different effect. So what I'm gonna do is gonna take my green. So I take the green, not from this clump here, but from the amount that I've mixed. And I start making my flat wash, which is just the same color throughout the entire piece. It should not be a gradient or anything like that. And really, I've used too much paint. So what I can do is I can clean my brush in the clean water, dry it a little bit, and then start kind of moving the paint around a little bit more. Okay. So that should be fine. Yep. All right, so that's our green flat wash. Now we're gonna do a wet on dry flat wash. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take my blue this time and do the same thing. I'm using my dirty water because the water is actually a little bit close to blue right now. It's a little bit green, but it'll be fine. I'm gonna do the same thing, just kind of make the amount I want of whatever shade I want. So I'm gonna make it a bit dark because I like the dark color. It's still not gonna be as dark as you think, and it dries much lighter than you think. That's what watercolors do, they'll dry lighter. So what you wanna do for this one is you just kind of do the same thing, make a nice even coating on there. Should be the same, shouldn't have any gradients to it. It's just a flat wash, all the same. All right, so we have our wet on wet flat wash and our wet on dry flat wash. Done. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to do wet on dry gradient. So we are going to do the green, and we're going to start off with our square to like completely dry. I'm going to take my green paint and make a dark. I'm going to make it a little bit darker. Use some of that, more of that paint, make it a deeper green. And I'm going to make this as dark as I can because I want it to be pretty dark. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring it down a little bit more, clean my brush a bit. I'm going to take a little bit, oopsie, I'm going to bring my paint up. I know this is not the proper way to do it, but I'm going to do it this way because I like doing that. So you bring it down and kind of make it into like the almost white area. So I'm going to dry my brush a bit because this is a bit too much. Go back, bring it down. So there's our gradient. You can also bring it back up a bit. That's going to move the gradient a bit in the darker areas up. Okay, so brush is clean. Now, here's what we're going to do next. We're going to make a gradient with two colors. So again, we're going to start with the green on the top. Bring it down a bit. Clean my brush, get a bit more clean. I'm going to dry it a bit. Kind of bring it down a bit more. So we have our green. Bring it down. Get a blue. I added more blue on accident. Bring it up. Try it. Kind of just bring this up so it makes a gradient into the green. Bring it down into the blue. I think maybe I need a bit more green. Also need a bit more blue. Just trying to bring it up into the blue, into the green. Now, this didn't turn out the way I wanted it to. So, let's see if I can fix it a bit. Nice dark green. Still letting it lighten up as it goes down into the blue. Try my brush again a little bit, get some blue paint, try to make it a little deeper. Yeah, this one didn't turn out the way I wanted it to, but it's still a little bit of a gradient. The point is that you bring your two colors in together so that they can, you know, mix a little bit in the middle. You don't want them to get too mixed because then you just get muddy colors. So this one, there's going to be a bit of a white spot in the middle because I didn't quite do my gradient properly. So there's like a little bit of white here that's going to show up. But you can see that it's getting darker to lighter and darker to lighter, and that's the objective. That's the point. I made a different one earlier, and so you can see that this is more white than any gradient. So hopefully it won't turn out like that one. It'll be a little bit better, but we'll see once this is dry. So the next thing that we're going to do is that we're going to make a wet on wet painting. We're going to just practice the wet on wet. So I'm going to take some water, clean my brush. I'll use the clean water for this, not the dirty water, and make my paper wet. This is a bit too much water because there's a puddle on there. So make sure I clean it off a little bit. You can just like take your brush and clean a bit of it off. You dry your brush, wipe it again, make sure that you're not taking too much water off. And then now we're going to just start with, maybe we'll start with blue this time. Start with blue. So we are doing wet on wet. My paint is already pretty wet. It's like a pool of paint now. So I don't need to put any more water in it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take that. And since our paper is wet, I'm just gonna blot little splotches of paint all over. And what happens is that it spreads out. It goes from being a small little dot to like spreading out into like a little spidery or spiderweb pattern. And I really like this technique. It took me a while to get used to how to do it, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to just start moving things around willy-nilly. And I'll show you later. Like you can do it now with one color. It doesn't muddy anything. But once you use another color, it gets a bit more tricky. You don't want to push your colors into each other. Oh no, my green got into my blue. That's okay. So you can drop the colors in. You don't want to move it. You don't want to start coloring it in. You just want to drop the colors in. So it creates another little spidery effect, but this time with a different color. So we're kind of going to get like a lily pad-ish kind of situation going on. Not necessarily a lily pad, but it looks like water to me. Like water with some plants growing out of it. That's what this looks like to me. And that looks really nice once it's dried. Okay, and the next one we're going to do wet on dry, which is very simple. All you need to do is just take a wet brush with whatever color you want and just paint whatever you want on top of the surface of dry paper. So that is wet on wet, or wet on dry. And I'm not really doing anything special. I'm just kind of making some diagonal lines. Like, this is not really a design, I'm just doing it because. So it makes that kind of look. It's very smooth. Just like we did here, it makes it very smooth. Now, I'd made a mistake and I went too far with my brush stroke, so there's some blue in here, but that won't really matter for the next thing. So what I'm gonna do, we're gonna do dry on dry. And what that means is that you need your brush to be dry and you need your paper to be dry. You don't need to be very dry, but you can. I'm gonna spread it out a little bit. I'm gonna spread out the bristles so you can see more textures. You don't have to spread the bristles, I'm just doing it because I want to. And I'm gonna use green. All right, and you can see the texture of the bristles as you use it. And I'll lift up my paper in a second to show you what I did. So you're mostly just taking your paint. You can also take like the deepest color that you have and do it. Like you can just take directly from your darkest spot of paint. And create such an interesting effect. Okay, and so that is dry on dry, and I'll show you what it looks like after I finish cleaning my brush because it's very important. I have too much paint on my brush. So this is what the texture looks like. You can see the grain of paper a little bit, and you can also see the texture of the brush. All right, and you can see a little bit of like bleeding in this one into different colors because I didn't let the bottom layer dry enough. So I was just painting, just going over it. So the bottom layer dried a little bit before I put the next layer of lines on top of it. So it kind of bled into the other layer, the bottom layer. So you just have to wait for your things to dry. If you want to put another layer on top of a layer that you've just painted and you want it to not bleed, you just wait for the first layer to dry. So last one. The last one we're going to do is we're going to use the lifting technique, which means that you need your tissue. I am going to paint this entire space blue. So I'm going to wet my brush a little bit, not very much, just want to clean it. And I'm gonna make it a little bit darker actually. Why not? I like the deep colors. I know some of the perks of like watercolors is that you can make it transparent, but I do like to make them deep colors as well. Okay, so that's a nice flat wash. Wet on dry flat wash. Okay, and now just clean my brush because I'm not going to need it right now. All right, so take your tissue, and I will say that you can use a brush to do this technique, but I'm not going to do that right now. So I'm just going to take my tissue, maybe not so much, and just kind of dabbing. Just create a nice little pattern. So I can move it a little bit. You have to do it quickly before everything dries. And now you have nice little cloud effects. All right, so now we have our 8 techniques, 8 basic techniques. So we have wet on wet flat wash, wet on dry flat wash, 1 gradient, I think this one was wet on dry, and this one was 2 color gradient. This is wet on wet, making a little speckled pattern. And so this one was wet on dry. This one is dry on dry, and this one is lifting. So with those techniques, you can start making different kinds of effects with your watercolors. So I hope that this was very helpful for you. Get my face in there. I hope this was very helpful for you. Let me know if you want to see something else like this. But the next thing that I'm going to put on the channel is I'm going to show you how to do some of these techniques with watercolor pencils. So some of them are the same kinds of principles, techniques, but you use them. You create them in a slightly different fashion because you are using a pencil. But also, there's a few other techniques that you can learn with using the pencils as well. So I hope you enjoyed this one about basic watercolors. Next time is basic watercolor pencils. Let me know if you enjoyed this. If you did, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you want to see in the future.